Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature, a personal look at lions, presented by Richard de Gouveia. Richard has been guiding with NatHab since 2015, and today he's joining us from his home in South Africa. Thanks for being with us today, Richard. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Kendall, and thanks NatHab for again hosting these awesome webinars. It's such a fun time to at least share some information with all of you. And we're on to another really cool topic today, being lions. And I've always been a mad fan of lions. So we're going to get into a little bit, but a little bit more about me. And I'll keep this very short because I don't like talking about me. I like talking about animals. But I've been guiding, as Kendall said, with NatHab since 2015, and I've been guiding since 2008. And I have had the privilege of living and working in some of the coolest places and natural places in the world, where I've had amazing things happen with all sorts of animals. And now I'm guiding through South Africa, Botswana, Madagascar, Uganda, Rwanda, Namibia, all sorts of cool places. So yeah, let's talk about lions. So where we're going to start is right at the beginning. Basically, lions descended from, or cats in general, descended from a first ancestor called Proailurus lemonensis, which basically means first cat. And this was about 25 million years ago. It was just larger than a domestic cat, had a long tail and sharp semi-retractable claws. Now, the studies that are going on also indicate that they could be the forefathers of the mongooses, the civets, and the hyenas. But these guys eventually gave rise to 4 species of cat to cougar-sized felids as they started spreading out across the globe. So these cats started spreading, and the origin was around Eurasia. One of these groups became called the saber-toothed cats, which died out along with its massive prey species of the mammoth about 10,000 years ago. The other group that survived were our normal cats, all 44 species, big and small. Now, there's been a lot of debate about how they came along and whether lions actually evolved from the saber-toothed cats, but cave paintings dating back 17,000 years from France show clear depictions of modern-day lions. So they lived together, and that's how they went along. But as the other cats died off, we are left with only one species, true species of lion, and 12 debatable subspecies. And you can see from this diagram how it started spreading out, and there were some in Europe, obviously in Africa. There still are some in Asia, but are more than likely just a subspecies of our guy, and then some in the Americas. Now, their habitats of current lions range all the way into India through Africa, and you can see from the orangey part the previous or the historic range, and then in the darker red parts you can see the current range. You can see how much smaller that's got, and we're going to talk a little bit about this once we get to the end in conservation, as there's quite a bit of push and pull that goes along there. So our main place that we see lions is the savannah. It's our first understanding of what lions are. It's our first go-to thing as to where lions are found. And we see them in open plains all the way through the Okavango Delta, through Zambia, through Zimbabwe, and down into South Africa. One of the coolest places that I get to see lions is in Uganda, in a park called Ishasha, where they have the tree climbing lions of Ishasha. Look at these guys in a tree. It is just magnificent. The first time I saw lions in a tree, it blew my mind. I mean, they were lying around like leopards. It was confusing. And then this lady was just having a little bit of fun all on her own. Another really crazy place to find lions, but is in the Namib Desert in Namibia. It's the oldest desert in the world. And on one of my trips, we went searching for these lions, these very famous lions, and you do this long drive all the way down through the reserve along the Hoornib River, and you come out onto the Skeleton Coast, which is on the Atlantic Ocean, and there's seal colonies there. And the first recorded huntings of lions on seals have occurred there. And when we were looking for them, we couldn't find them. But when we got back to our plane that was going to fly us on a 6-minute flight back to the lodge, we found next to the natural habitat logo, you'll see 2 lion pug marks. And these spoor were left there right where we had been, they'd been at our plane the whole time. But my real introduction to lions came around when I was working at a place called Sabi Sabi. And these are 2 lionesses right at the airstrip building. So that's the building where guests would fly in. And I had an amazing introduction to these lions, and they were called the Southern Pride. And what I would like to do today is to talk factual stuff, and I also want to string in the story of the Southern Pride, because I got to watch these guys for 6 years, and the pride dynamics, the changes, the way things worked was so interesting. But my first experience of these lions were a group called YPO, which some of you might be aware of, had come to do a trip through there. So they were taking up every bed in every lodge, and we had to get the other guests out. But as you can see, it was a cloudy day. The cloud cover was too low. Planes couldn't come in to collect the other guests. I was left as a trainee in this building, and as you can see, the walls and doors, the doors and windows are fairly innocuous. They don't really work at stopping a lion. And I was left there with 36 guests, and there were 13 lions at the top of the airstrip hunting wildebeest. Well, you try control 36 people, all excited because they're lions, but you're trying to keep them calm, and all things said, well, we're going well. And there were 2 toilets there. But the lions went after the first bits of wildebeest, missed. Then a warthog was scared out of the bush, so it ran across the runway, lions after the warthog. Everyone's now making a noise. The lions haven't killed anything, so they start walking down the airstrip. Well, now it's up to me to find a space for these guys. So what do? You shove them all like a can of sardines into the bathrooms. But there was no space for me, so I had to climb on top of the roof in order to get away from this craziness. So that was my introduction to the Southern Pride. But basically, what is happening is a pride of lions is a group of females which then have 1 to many dominant males that will look after them. And this is a very important part of things, because the pride itself is only the females. The males are rotated a lot, and we'll get more into this. Generally, a pride of lions will be from 2 to 4 females, and anything over 4 will be what we call a super pride. It becomes a lot of mouths to feed, and they need to pull down bigger prey. Here you can see 3 females and our vehicle watching on, but the reason why lions became a pride was quite simply competition. Back in a couple of million years ago, when lions were evolving, there were long-legged running hyenas that were direct competition for a solo cat. If you think of every other cat in the world, bar a very few moments where there might be a coalition like cheetahs and tigers, where mother and cubs might be together, but these are the only sociable, true sociable cats that live in a group. And the reason is they, as single individuals, had the same weight as this long-legged running hyena. So a female lioness will weigh around 250 pounds, and a male will get up to about 550 pounds. So they're quite big, and these hyenas were the same. And in order to outcompete this competition, they had to band together in order to form prides. And they did so well that they outcompeted these hyenas in their entirety. So you will always have a male or a coalition, we call it a coalition of males, that will then also be running the pride. They are responsible for various duties, mainly mating, secondly, protecting the area to protect the cubs. This is a cool video of this super pride. So the Southern Pride, when I first met them, were made up of 8 females, 8 large females, and they had 12 cubs. And this was a crazy, crazy number of things going on. I mean, it was just, it was 4 large females, and 12 cubs. And this whole dynamic was amazing to see. To see so many lions in one place is just a crazy, crazy thing. And they had 2 males that were running them. They were called the golf course males. And these males were great. One day, one of the males disappeared, and about 3 or 4 months later, the other male was bitten by a Mozambique spitting cobra and died. So this pride was now a pride without leaders, without males at least. So your breeding ability drops down somewhat. But within a pride, the cubs are priority number 1. The mothers are trying to look after them, trying to feed them, and the males are trying to keep other males away, because the first thing that happens when new males come into an area is they do what is called infanticide, and they kill the cubs. This is in order to bring the females into estrus so that they will then produce their offspring, and these guys are then not running the, looking after somebody else's cubs. Play is a very, 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 very important part of their life. And the reason play is important is because it's exercise. It is practice for when they're hunting. These 2 lionesses were just playing and tackling each other. And the other thing that happens, and I'm going to go back to these cubs, is you will have a lot of head rubbing that happens within a pride. So when you see lions come together, you'll see them nuzzle up and rub heads together. They will groom each other. They will try and build up this incredible social bond by this touching, and this contact is very important to them. Now, lions are obviously known for their hunting, and lionesses are thought to be the sole hunters, and the boys steal everything. This is a fallacy. Lionesses hunt more, but males are often involved in bigger hunts. So when you have super prides or hunting bigger animals, your giraffe, your buffalo, hippo, things like that, your male is often the one that needs to get involved in order to pull the animals down. His superior weight is a great advantage to the pride, to be able to add that extra weight and pull the animal off its feet where it's most vulnerable. And then secondly, it's more powerful in its bite, so it's able to then strangle out things. So lionesses or lions in general are nighttime nocturnal creatures. And it's almost like shift work. What you have is in the first part of the evening at sunset, it's what dusk and dawn, crepuscular, we have our leopards that get active. And then as things get darker, then our lions get up, leopards move out of the way, and lions start hunting. And then from about 10, 11 p.m., the hyenas take over the gap until the next morning. Doesn't mean to say that this is a firm, fast rule. This is obviously a lioness hunting during the day. And I remember on this day, it was about 110 degrees outside. The guest was nibbling at my ear saying, listen, please can we go out? Please can we go out? And I just said to him, listen, guy, there is nothing happening now. It is 110 out. Everything is hiding and going for shade. Well, boy, did I have to bite my lip when we found the pride hunting a herd of buffalo and chasing them all around in 110 degrees. So you can never know everything. A textbook will never tell you everything. It gives you a general idea of things. So this was a crazy hunt that I was privileged to see, and it's sometimes difficult for people to see, but it is very much the nature of how things go. Nature does not have a good or bad, it just has a happening. And we watched these lions come in and kill 2 buffaloes in one hunt, and it was quite interesting because this buffalo kept on trying to use our vehicles as a point of safety. So he kept on trying to reverse himself in there so the lions wouldn't get, and you had to get further and further away, which was too cool and too crazy at the same time. Now, with the hunting, lions have to eat about 10% of their body weight daily in order to get sufficient food. But they don't do it in meals and say, oh, I'm full now, I'll wait for lunch or wait for dinner. They have to take what they can when they can, because they don't know when their next meal is going to come. So 10% of a female's weight is around 25 pounds of meat required daily. Male, 50 to 55 pounds of meat daily. That is an extreme amount of meat. But a female can put away around 50 pounds in a sitting. So once that animal is down, she will climb in there and she will binge feed so much that she will distend her belly and even tear her stomach lining because she has eaten so much. And at that point, she doesn't go, okay, I give up. She goes and sleeps for a bit, digests for a bit, and comes back and fills up. And this whole process goes along. A big male can do over 100 pounds of meat in a sitting. So now you consider, when I was talking about a super pride, consider the southern pride, which had these 4 females and their 12 cubs. There's a lot of mouths to feed and no males. And as they grew up, the cubs got older and older and became adolescents. Now, of that 12, 3 of them died. There were 5 males and 4 females, and it became a super pride because these adolescents were now at an age of 3 years old. The young males were still hanging around, which normally at that sort of age, the males would have pushed them out, the dominant males, but because there were none, they weren't part of it, and they became incredible buffalo killers. That was their role. They would kill a buffalo and finish the entire thing in a night. 2,000 pounds of meat gone in a night. Absolutely fascinating to watch, and it is not a friendly affair. So this was an impala that was caught by the lions, and I'll play the video now, but listen to the sounds. And this impala lasted all of about 6 minutes from dying to being complete. It becomes a scene of survival of the fittest. All table manners are off. All bets are off. It is whoever can get the most will get the most. And this is one of those things where that pride dynamic that I was talking about earlier, where they were previously solitary cats and had to learn to live together. Once food gets on the table, that idea of being cool to one another is no longer. It's off the table. They're all in, try and get as much as they can. Once they're finished and faces are bloodied up like this, there is a massive amount of allo grooming of one another that is there to strengthen those bonds again, to basically say, I'm sorry, oh, did I do that to your head? Oh, I'm so sorry. Even the little cubs get tussled and beaten around in this whole melee, and it is a very important part of lion society, but they manage to get past it and do their thing. The other thing that goes with hunting is that the oldest, most experienced females are always leading the hunt. They are not a lead female. There's no hierarchy in the females. It's more an experiential thing, who has the most experience and who doesn't. And what they will do is they have different hunting strategies. So the buffalo is generally a create chaos, see where there's a weak one, take advantage. I've even seen lions hunting buffalo for 3 to 4 days before making a kill. And what they do is they push the buffalo, keep watching, push the buffalo, and they use landmarks. So there was one point on the reserve where there was this massive dugout ravine that then had a very steep wall, and you could physically see the lions moving the buffalo in that direction. And the reason why I said they were doing it is because they didn't just do it once. I have seen it on numerous occasions that they would push the buffalo in that direction to get to that point. And then they would chase them up the hill and push them up, and inevitably one would lose its footing on the up, and they would be able to grab them. And then the other buffalo were up at the top looking down, and it became a risky situation to go back and fetch your friend. Buffalo often will go back and fetch their friends. They will often kill lions if they have the opportunity. In fact, one of the cubs that we'll talk about in a bit, was actually killed by buffalo. That they found the den, and the buffalo went in and killed one of the cubs. The other two managed to hide deep enough in a bush to get away, but one wasn't so lucky. So this is an incredible way of doing things. In Kruger National Park, within the main reserve, there are tarmac roads, asphalt roads, and the lions have learned to hunt giraffe using these roads. And what they do is they set up an ambush. And what the lions will do is push these giraffe towards this, and the ambush will sit on the side of the road. And as the giraffe is running towards the road, a lioness will pop up, and the giraffe will try and turn, and they skid and slip and fall, and that's the end of that. And they've learned to use an asphalt road. Think of the intelligence and the adaptation that has to take place in order to do that. And before this, the Southern Pride became massive buffalo killers, they were also giraffe killers. And what they used to do is wait and push, actually make themselves present to a giraffe. And the first thing a giraffe does is look directly at you. They look at a predator. It's a great way to see how things are going. They look straight at this predator, and at that point, they would then push the giraffe back and back to fall over and trip it over a fallen log. So they would create this ambush and push it round. So these situations are incredible. The other thing that lions do, which is quite fascinating, is they do not stick around. They do not like competition. Competition is bad. Cheetahs, leopards, hyenas, and wild dogs are all up to be killed. So these were some wild dogs moving along, and then they found the lions. They literally ran into the lions. And the lions weren't sticking around. Here comes one of the lead females, one of the older females coming to try and kill them. So the video quality on this one wasn't great, but it was a cool slow-mo nonetheless. But the best part of it is these big, scary cats called lions are absolutely, positively, completely scared of water. And there was this puddle that was sitting in the road, and every single lion walked around it and tiptoed around it as if it was lined with crocodiles and something was going to get them. They absolutely hate water. So within the pride, we were talking about the males. And a pride male, or a coalition of males, is formed when certain things happen. So like I said to you, this pride, the Southern Pride, had 2 males. They then died, leaving the 4 adult females with the 9 now adolescents, 4 of which were female, 5 were male. And these guys were moving around. But the adolescents had got old enough that the females, the older female systems, were kicking in and needing a bit of love. So they need to find pride males. Now, the way males work is once they get to around 2.5 years old, the pride male will push out the adolescents. They live a nomadic life until they are big enough to be able to fight for their own pride. Males will dominate kills. Here's a male hogging the last bits of a buffalo. Watch this little one, the little one lying between his legs there. He's actually going to have a nibble. He's going to start nibbling and he gets caught. A brave boy coming back at the big guy like that. And these males move around. They can be in coalitions. I've seen coalitions of 5. I know of coalitions of 9 individuals that have moved around. One of the most famous coalitions in the Sabi Sands is called the Mapojos, or was called the Mapojos. They ruled for around 8 years, ruled an area. So they won't just have one pride. The bigger your coalition, the more area you can cover. So they had about 2 or 3 prides within their area, and they ruled for 8 years. Now, in the norm, a coalition or a single male might hold a territory for 3 years, somewhere around there before he's pushed out, which is a perfect amount of time for him to raise cubs from start to finish. And like I say, once the new males move in, they will kill any existing cubs. Anything that's under 1 will be killed. So there becomes this toss-up that goes on with life. Now, their job is to move around and mark territory. The more you are, the more territory you can mark. And one of the ways that they do that is by roaring. And roaring can be heard from 5 miles away to the human ear. So this is a pride of lions, the southern pride, all giving it horns. And what I want you to listen out for is listen for the little cubs trying to imitate mom and dad's calls. There's Big Daddy. So that sound cannot be described as a sound when you are present in its presence. When a lion is roaring, it is a feeling. It cuts through you like a hot knife through butter. Every single joint cell in your body is vibrating with this incredible power that gets pushed out there. And that sound is the first line of defense. That sound travels much further. I mean, you think it travels 5 miles for our ears. You think of how far it travels to a lion's ears. And they can individually recognize more than 20 different individuals' calls. So lions are able to pick up and say, oh, that's that guy. Oh, he sounds strong. So these young adolescents that have been kicked out, they're looking at this whole thing going, okay, this is cool, but that guy sounds scary. I'm not going to mess with him. I'll wait a bit. And then once those sort of sounds drop off, that might entice a younger male to come see what's going on. Maybe the males have disappeared. Maybe the pride has gone through a problem. He can come in. So the second line of defense will be that of marking territory. So this is a male lion urinating on a tree. They will also scrape and then put their claws in something because they've got glands between the toes, which when they do these scratching, so even like your house cat, when it does scratching, is laying scent. And that is the next layer of defense. So now the guy goes, these youngsters decide, okay, this sounds like a good idea, gets to that urine, and he will then do what is called a phlegm grimace. They bare their teeth like that, and this opens a gland that sits on the palate, opens it up, allows the scent from the urine to go inside. That will tell them the age, the sex, the sexual status, the specific individual, the condition of that individual, testosterone levels, estrogen levels, all of that is stored within that urine. So they might get to that and go, whoa, this is a big guy. He just might not have been calling. He must have laryngitis or something. We're going to go away. Or they go, he's old. This is our chance. So this is how the whole thing works. And then the males will come in. The next part that you look at is the mane. So now the guys will walk in and go look at the male. The bigger the mane, the more intimidating it is. The darker the mane, the black on a mane is actually from testosterone production. The darker the mane, the more testosterone he's producing. So again, an intimidation. The ladies are also mad for brunettes. They love a dark-haired male. They've done lots of scientific experiments with pictures of males, and the darker mane males were always chosen over the light mane males. It's a pity my mane has disappeared a little bit, but I'm married, so it's okay. So this becomes a visual thing. So now you've gone from roaring to scent to visual, and the boys might say, oh, no, he looks scary, I'm out of here, or let's take him. And the more you are, the more ability you have of knocking over and taking over a pride. So this pride, like I said, had lost its males. This female was called Mandlev, which means ear. If you can have a look at her right ear, is floppy, And it was always like that. She went out looking for males. She literally went out and mated with as many males as she could find without ever falling pregnant. It's what we call false estrus. And false estrus is where she produces the smells of being on heat without ovulation. So it's a very cool thing. So this is what happens when lions mate.
I just want to hear the roar again. The roar is great. Seriously, it's like, listen to that. Listen to that.
Oh, little slap.
I thought he was so sweet there, Darth.
So when lions mate, it can be a tense affair. That was quite a calm one. Here you can see something that's a little bit more outrageous, but a lion's penis actually has barbs on it. So when he's mating with her and he retracts, it hurts her. And what they will often do is what you saw him doing is biting down on the neck. And the reason is when a mother picks up a cub by the neck, you will see them go limp. There's a nerve that runs through the neck that when pinched forces the body to be still. So he's trying to do that to subdue her while he's doing this. They will mate every 15 minutes for 5 days. This becomes very tense, very, very tense. And every time he pulls out, she turns around and tries to kill him, which he doesn't like. And then they sit off, and then she will come back and she initiates it. She's the one that initiates it, and she will actually come back and present herself. She will arch her back, which is called lordosis, and he will then react to that. Sometimes he's very tired, especially towards the end of the 5 days. She has to go and do it quite a few times before he's in with the game. So 110 days later, you get cubs. 110 days later. So this female went out, looked for males. She found 3 males from a reserve next door. She enticed them and said, listen, guys, there's space. We don't have males. There's 4 females here. Pull in, come do your thing. They came in, mated with the 4 adult females, and they all started having babies. In total, there were another 12 babies that rocked up. So the pride had now gone from 9 adolescents with 4 adult females, so 13, plus the 3 males, 16, plus the 12 cubs, 28 lions. Now you have a huge amount of stuff going on. But these males were too stretched and they were moving around too much. And what ended up happening was other males came in. So here you can see some of the cubs as they were coming through. Now, 110 days, if you consider that's just over 3 months, almost 4 months, you consider we have a gestation period of 9 to 10 months, and that amount of time, our babies come out. Yes, we're not as able, but you think of an impala or a wildebeest or an antelope of some sorts, when they come out, within 30 minutes, they're on their feet and moving. That's what we call a precocial young. Precocious, moving around, able to do their thing. Lions are born altricial. You cannot imagine a fat, pregnant lioness running around with this big belly trying to hunt something. It ain't gonna work. So she has her babies early. They're blind, they're hairless, they're deaf, they don't have anything other, and she has to keep them in den sites and move them around. And this is when they are the most vulnerable. That's when that buffalo killed one, hyenas will kill them, leopards will kill them, other lions will kill them, other lionesses will kill them. So it becomes a big deal. And these lionesses started procreating and having these babies. And it was an amazing, amazing time to be on the reserve. 12 babies, plus 9 big lions, plus the 3 males from time to time. It was awesome. We had the most amazing time. Here's a whole picture of them all lined up having a drink. But 2 males called the Kruger males then arrived and they moved in. And these guys were big. And they caught one of the males who was patrolling on his own, caught him. We thought he was dead because we found his tracks. We couldn't find him. 7 days later, he emerged. He was cut to ribbons on his back where these guys had then attacked him. And he just shot straight through the reserve, picked up his brother, and they moved into Kruger. And these 2 males came in. Now, what did I say? The first thing that happens when new males move in, they kill the cubs. So I was ready for massacre. It was going to be a massacre. The lionesses did their best to keep pushing these guys away. Everything they could do. But the lionesses eventually just decided and said, listen, there are 8 lionesses here. And by this stage, the 5 adolescents had now been pushed out. So the 5 adolescent males. So it was now 8 lionesses.
Watch it. Watch the females.
What is it?
So instead of this being a massacre, the 8 ladies decided this wasn't going to happen. So every time the boys tried to come in, the ladies would just beat them senseless. And the boys were getting a bit perturbed by this, but also the 4 younger females who hadn't been mated with, who were now coming into season for the first time. And every time the boys came, they decided it was better to make love than war. So one of them would decide to go into false estrus, lure the boys away, mate with those boys, and then push off while the rest of the females pulled the cubs away. It was this ingenious way of actually working the system. So this kept on going, and eventually it came to a point where the 4 young females said, well, these guys aren't going anywhere. We might as well have their babies. And these boys accepted the cubs. They accepted being around those things. The other role that a male has within that is once they start having their own cubs, they will dominate a kill, like I showed in that other video where the males were chasing the females and the other cubs away. If they have small cubs, they'll chase all of the others away and allow their small cubs to feed. And in that melee of the chaos of lions feeding, the little cubs will never, they could get killed in the chaos of all of that. So by the male dominating, he'll allow his cubs to come feed without that fear of being killed. So they play this balancing act. It becomes this incredible balancing act. So these females started mating, and they then had cubs. Now the pride grew to a number of 36 individuals. 36 individuals, absolutely madness. But they kept on because the pride was so big, because the numbers were so big, they had to kill more and more things. And we even saw on the reserve the drop in game numbers, in general game numbers, as the lions started feeding. So they had to expand their territory. They killed off the pride next door to them to expand it. Then they pushed north and they ran into a wall of hurt. And the 2 males were killed, which again left these females very helpless. So at that stage, we then had 15 different male lions, 4 different coalitions, 1 of 5, 1 of 4, 1 of 3. Where are we at now? That's 7, 12, and another 1 of 3. And this guy I watched from young, his name was Solo. He was on his own. He joined up with the remains of the pride that were killed off next door, called the Ifield Pride. And they formed this incredible bond, and they sort of started taking over. And again, I saw these females starting to play jiggy with it. And they would pull the males aside, mate with this guy for a day, false estrus. It was never the full 5 days, and push things around. So it was this incredible dynamic that was going on all around us. And unfortunately, because of the chaos and because of these males, everyone started splitting up. So a few females took cubs that way. Some of the cubs started dying, and slowly this pride went from its glorious 36 and started whittling down. More males came in trying to take over, but nothing ever settled, not while I was still at the lodge. Eventually, one of the females, and this image has a lot of power for me because one of the females was caught by buffalo. Now, she was hunting them alone. The buffalo caught her. They gouged her. She lost her eye. She was so injured. She was so frail, but she was still after these buffalo, and she actually caused a stampede across the river, which killed one of the buffalo calves in the stampede, but she was too weak to feed on that. And this is basically the story of the ebb and flow. You have this incredible pride that grows to this magnanimous number, and then it suddenly drops off to next to nothing, and you get stuck with all of these like I said, the ebb and flow. It just moves along. The pride has since recovered. They're a normal size pride, so there's only 3 females and 2 males and a couple of cubs at the moment. So it's a fascinating dynamic going on altogether. Now, when we talk lions, we have to talk conservation. And lion conservation is a huge thing that has to be dealt with, because they are so maligned by the fact that they kill things. They kill cattle, they kill goats, they kill horses. And we're trying to, as humans, trying to be farmers, trying to get these things going, and lions come and take our livelihood. This is not a great thing. This is a shot of a lion that's been darted, and vets are working on it. When I talk about things that happen, so your human-animal conflict is a huge part of it. And what ends up happening is they get caught in snares by poachers, not for them, but they'll be looking for general game and unfortunately get caught up. Or they'll kill a cattle, and the guys will go out of the way, people will go out of the way to poison carcasses to kill the lions in order to do that. So for a lot of the things, especially in a place like Ishasha in Uganda, where we go visit, these animals are so close to populations that they have to be collared and they have to be constantly watched. And I know of many occasions where the lions have to be darted and then moved back in. One situation that happened to me when we were at the reserve, and consider that Kruger National Park is surrounded by a fence, a young male lion of about 3 years old managed to get out. He was in the farmlands. He had been hunting cattle and people had found him. So we went out with one of the vets from Kruger. We decided we were going to go find this guy. So we're tracking him on foot, but it's this incredibly dense area. It's called sickle bush, and it has these spines on it that can puncture any car tire. They are so thick and so hectic. And we were tracking. Eventually we found him. We saw his head popping up. The vet loaded up the anesthetic, put it in the little dart gun, popped one off, hit the thing in the bum, and it ran into this thick bush. So now we sit there and we wait, and the vet says, okay, you've got to wait 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, it'll be cool. You can go in and you can help out, and we'll find him. So after 5 minutes, we jumped off. We started looking, and we're looking, and we're looking, and we're looking, and at about 50 minutes, we started going, guys, how long does this antidote last? So he says, no, about 60 minutes, and then we'll have to get back in the vehicle. So walk around, and the next thing, I have this lion on its front legs trying to drag itself to kill me, but its back legs aren't working, the poor thing. So he's trying to get to me. I'm calling the vet. The vet sneaks in behind. He says, you just keep distracting him. And the vet just gave him another jab, and he went to sleep, and we were able to move him back into Kruger. But this human-animal conflict is a huge, huge part. And a lot of the time, what we're trying to do is to obviously have community education, but you're trying to also pay people for any losses that may occur. You have traditions like the Maasai, where the coming of age is to kill a lion. We have to change those ideals, change the way things are going. And because of the way this has all gone for so long, it is estimated that 100 years ago there were 200,000 wild lions. We are now down to 20,000, if that number still exists. Hunting is a huge problem because people use it for trophy hunting, and we have to consider the benefits of keeping things around. One story that comes to mind, especially with the idea of hunting, when Kruger National Park was created, it was created to Paul Kruger, who was not the president at that stage, but he had said, we need to conserve an area to protect animals because we're going to hunt everything to extinction. So, and this was in 1860. Eventually in 1905, they proclaimed the area called Sabi Reserve, and they were trying to protect all the antelope, the things that people hunted. At that stage, lion were vermin, wild dogs were vermin, leopard were vermin, hyenas were vermin, because they killed the animals they were trying to protect. So there was a section ranger who was called Harry Volater, and he went riding on his horse, and he would do things, And on his rifle, which is still in a museum in Kruger National Park, there are notches on his rifle for all the predators that he killed. You could see hundreds of notches where he had killed these animals. So incredible. Our idea of them is so twisted. And what happened was he actually went riding on a horse. They were looking for a place to camp, got to the first water hole. There was no water, so he said he was going to push on while the other people pulled in behind. And as he was going along, 2 male lions came and attacked. One took him off the top of the horse. The other one went off after the horse, and the horse went bolting and got away. But this lion had him by the shoulder, was dragging him off to be killed. He wasn't fighting at that stage. He was amazingly thinking, you know, that instinct of being still. And he remembered that he carried a knife on his belt. But he says at the best of times, this knife would not stay in its holster. And he reached down, and the knife was there, and he was able to then feel the lion's chest while it was dragging him off by the shoulder for the heartbeat, and could feel the heart, and then stabbed it twice through the heart, and managed to survive this entire ordeal, managed to survive an 80-mile horseback ride to the hospital, which took 3 days, and he had to turn his head because his shoulder had become gangrenous from the wound. And people were made stronger, but it just shows how different the idea is on how our conservation, our thought on conservation was. That 100 years ago, we were saying we need to shoot these animals because they're killing the things we're trying to conserve. Now we're realizing that it's an integral part of everything, and everything is perfectly interlinked with one another. So our best efforts have to be to keep these things alive. Things like lions play a massive role in moving buffalo, like I was saying with the hunting of buffalo. These are great ways of stopping overgrazing. If you have a herd of 500, 1,000 buffalo, you need them moved, otherwise they're going to graze an area flat, and lions keep them moving. So that's the basic breakdown of it. I'm really open to a lot of questions now. There's so much that I could have gone into, but our time is short. So Kendall, if you want to open it up to questions, I'm really excited to help out.
Yes, that was absolutely fantastic, Richard. Thank you. We do have some questions to get to. I'd like to remind everyone first that they can submit questions to you via the questions field in the control panel. Okay, first question. How do lions decide who does what when they're hunting?
That's an amazing question. So lions have this incredible ability that it is just about time with one another. So if you look at the back of a lion's ears, so I'm going to see if I can find a photo for us here. You can see on the back of the cub's ears, you can see the black marks, and on the tip of the tail is black. So the oldest female will take the lead in a hunt, and she will decide what's going, or the most experienced, and each one has their specific role. So I'll explain the first hunt I was privileged to see. I'm a bit of a sadist when it comes to things. I've always watched Nat Geo, and that was always a very exciting part of everything. And I've been dying to see one of these in real life. And we were following the 8 females, and all the cubs were coming behind. The 8 cubs knew immediately that it was time to stop. The main lead female then looped around. We were trying to see what was going on. We couldn't even see what they were hunting, but we could see that they were hunting. So we started following this female, and she started looping around, and then we saw there was some kudu, some large antelope that were in a thicket. So we decided, okay, we'll go back, and all the other 7 females had looped out and created this almost bow, this big net to capture them at. And as the other lioness came around, the kudu, the antelope, got the scent of this lion and started bounding off in the opposite direction. And one was bounding these massive leaps, 8 feet in the air, and it was just met by a lioness in mid-air and pulled down, and these 17 lionesses, or these 17 lions, then descended on it and started eating it. So it's all about how long they've been hunting together, understanding it. They use visual communication, which are the ears, and just a total understanding of doing it so many times together and teaching the cubs their different roles within it.
Amazing. What's the typical lifespan of a lion in the wild?
Fantastic. Another great question. So the typical lifespan of a female will be anything from around 14 through 20 years. It just depends on food sources, you know, its pride size, availability, because the older they get, the worse off they become. But because of the fact that they're in a pride, they can stay alive quite long because the others can do the main job and they'll still be able to get a bit of food. However, males will have a shorter time. Because a male sort of reaches his maturity at about 5 to 6 years, it's when his mane goes from a mohawk and touches ear to ear. So you can see this guy is the perfect example of an older male. And they then have to run a pride. So at that point of 5 or 6 years, they then get their pride, run the pride, and then are kicked out at about 9 years old. Very seldom will they have another chance at it, but they could theoretically go on and get another pride or another territory at that stage. But generally they'll die between 11 and 13 years because of this intensity. Once they've been kicked out, they're literally moving through other male lions' territories, and these guys don't want them around. They want to kill them because these are competition to their females.
Okay. And do males who are in the same coalition, do they cooperate with each other? How do they treat each other?
So again, there will be a pecking order that definitely is sorted out between them. And the biggest point that they will have this pecking order is when there is mating involved. Food, obviously, but mating is a big thing. And I've seen the best of friends, best of coalitions have the biggest wars when one female is in estrus. But for the most part, they rely on each other. Remember, they've grown up in a pride together. For the most part, there are occasions where you might have one male that was kicked out of a pride, join up with another male or 2 males or 3 males from another pride. That can often happen. But for the most part, these guys have grown up with one another. Once they get kicked out of their natal pride by the pride males, they then have to hunt for themselves. So they're always working together. They've created bonds that are blood's thicker than water. These bonds are very, very strong. So yeah, there'll be a bit of a tussle when there's ladies around. Yeah, there'll be a bit of a tussle when there's food around, but for the most part, they love each other and they rely on one another to stay alive.
Okay. There are a lot of people who are curious about what happens to the cubs that are killed when other males move in and if mothers mourn the cubs.
Another spectacular question, and one that I've visually seen some incredible stuff. So for the most part, if a cub is killed by, say, a hyena, hyena will eat it. Leopard will eat it. If a male kills a cub, for the most part, he's going to leave it there and walk on and try and get to that female. Within a few months, or it can be as short as a few weeks to a few months, she'll fall back into estrus. But that Mandlev, the one that I told you about with the floppy ear, she raised her cubs. I watched her lose 3 litters, and in all 3 litters, she ate her cubs that had died. At one stage, it's very much like a mourning because it's this ritualistic feeding. It isn't out of hunger. Although one time she was so emaciated because she had lost such condition that it probably was a retention of a bit of energy that she'd given out. And after the one set of cubs, I specifically remember it so clearly that she literally hung off the side of the pride. They would kill, and the food would be there and she wouldn't go eat. So she was in this, what I would term a depression. And I don't want to give anyone the idea that we're anthropomorphizing things. Remember, we're animals, so I believe that if we can feel something, animals can feel something. I've seen a lot of these emotions. If the cubs came up to her, she would snarl at them, beat them, bite them, chase them away. She was a grumpy old bat. She just didn't want anything to do with anyone. And that lasted about 3 weeks, and then she clicked out of it. And then suddenly she was the best aunt in the world. She was the leader of the pack. She was the one that led up when that male lion was coming in to kill the cubs. Her cubs were dead already, and she was the one chasing off the other male lions. So she became the big part of it. So that cubs being killed off is a very important part of life. Because they're a top predator, you have to have some management of numbers at some stage, and the best management when you get to a top level predator is at a baby level when they're very vulnerable.
Fascinating. There are quite a few people who want to know what the typical size of a litter is.
Anything from 1 through the largest one I've seen is five cubs, which is quite fascinating to see. And it's very tough for a mother with 5 cubs because she has 4 teats. So there's constantly a fight, and you will see a runt of a litter. But amazingly, both females that had 5 cubs that I saw brought all 5 of them up, because what the females will do is they will allosuckle. So they will suckle babies that aren't their own, especially when there's big kills. So if they're sitting around a buffalo carcass, doesn't matter which cub it is, if she's producing, if she's lactating, the cub can feed off of her. As soon as times get tough, though, the mother will only allow her cubs to feed off of her. So it's a balancing act. They want the pride to grow, but it is their genetics first and then the others.
Okay. And you talked a lot about males leaving prides, getting kicked out. Do females ever get kicked out of a pride?
Absolutely. There are a couple of documented cases where females were killing babies. Textbook gets written, but the lions don't read it. So sometimes let's talk about when those big males when we had the big run of males and you had 15 males moving through the area, all coming in. The pride split. It split itself. And when pressure gets too big, the pride may say, okay, listen, there's 30 of us. This is too much. We're going to take this area, you take that area, and there's almost an understanding between them. But yes, females will leave the pride, but for the most part, they will stick with their natal pride from birth through death.
Right. So we've got time for one last question today, and I think it's a good one to end on. What can we do to help lion conservation?
Honestly, what we do as tourists is such a powerful thing, because it means that a lion is worth more alive than it is dead. With community conservation, with community education, with our better understanding of their habits and their influences, and trying to find ways to live together and mitigate the human conflict is the best way to do it. So places like WWF that have these incredible programs to protect animals like this, to educate people, to create laws around hunting, that is a very powerful stance. But as a tourist, you are doing the best job that you can.
Okay, great. So that was the last question we had time for today. So I'll hand it back over to you for some closing comments.
Guys, thank you so much for joining in today. It has been an absolute joy chatting to you all. Please, if anyone has any other questions, you can find me on social media and just send me a question. I'm happy to answer it. And stay safe, stay happy, and let's get traveling again soon.
Absolutely. And my thanks as well for joining us today. And be sure to join us Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, so we'll get that replay out to you soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Thanks, Richard. Goodbye, everybody.
Kendall.